Just take us through a brief of the narrative of what work you've been doing primarily as a student leader.
Thank you, Hugo, and good morning to the viewers. Yeah, it has been a tough week, starting from last week when the protest commenced. But this is just the continuation of what is happening from 2015. Just that now I'm not on the picket line, I'm on the other side of the courts. So when we started in 2015 or any other previous year, we were on the front line. We experienced the violation or the wrath of the system, how they responded to protest. And what I've experienced in that endeavor is that access to lawyers is a very difficult thing. So you find that students are unable to find lawyers readily available. That leads them to be detained for a longer period instead of just...
Why though? The universities are churning out so many lawyers. You would expect them to be available at their beck and call.
Unfortunately, remember, in many instances, the university is the complainant as well, because the protest would have occurred within the vicinity of the institution and then expand to the society, and members of the community, they also join. But ultimately, you'll find that when you talk about the complaint to damage to property, the university would be the complainant and would send the witnesses to testify. So it's unlikely that they would assist the student in getting lawyers. You do have some staff members who are sympathetic to the call that would assist by recommending lawyers. But under these circumstances, I can say that students are privileged. I'm a newly admitted advocate, so they know me. We've been representing them in student disciplinary hearing. We've also been connecting them with other lawyers that have been in practice for long. So now it became an easy process with my learned colleague, Cyril Thabela. So it's easy for us to be readily available for students, so that when they are detained, they are able to be released within a short period of time, instead of just being detained for the entire weekend. And we also assist in making representation, and you can also take you through as to what occurred on Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday respectively, more especially with the arrests that happened at Parktown Vest protest, where students were detained in Hillbrook police station.
Cyril, something that was interesting is that the NPA then said that they would not be prosecuting students arrested during this event. Can you tell us why?
Yeah, indeed, when charges are being placed against the accused, we happen to be the student. So we go and they negotiate as colleagues, because NPA is also part and parcel of the justice system. So, and then as lawyers, as private lawyers, we are also part and parcel, and we have to see the vehicle of justice moving smoothly. So we went to National Prosecution Authority and then discussed with them, and then we wanted to know their view regarding the matter. And then for us, we were not convinced that the NPA indeed have a strong case against the student. And then considering the fact that some classes which we have been advised by Advocate Moela, who also happened to be a student, to say, no, look here, classes have commenced, and then it's going to be unfair for students to be detained. And then in most cases, what NPA will do will postpone the matter for further investigations, and then up until then they have built a strong case against you or against the student, and then that would be unfair for students. You can't focus on studying, whereas you know that there are pending investigations against you and stuff like that. So then we have to intervene.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the rights of students during public demonstrations, or their capacity or ability to demonstrate. What are those rights?
Students, like every citizen of the Republic of South Africa, they have their constitutional right, and then they also have that right to picket, as long as it can be done within the scope of the law, to comply, not to damage properties, which in most cases is the concern of the police.
So in this case, why were the students arrested?
Yeah, just to touch on that, normally, you know, and that has been a concern as to how police respond to the protest. So in a lot of instances, you'll find students, they normally call occupation, occupy this building, occupy this building. That is not necessarily violent. It is just to assert their own rights in a particular way. Because if you afford lawyers or you have access to lawyers, you would, if you are privileged enough, you would approach the court on an urgent basis and then assert your rights through the courts. But that is another way and an expensive way of asserting your rights that are protecting the Constitution. So students would mobilize and picket and occupy certain buildings. So you'll find that the police, they don't even respond in terms of how they should, in terms of the regulation of the Gatherings Act. Because what the police should do when they approach the protesters, they should try to negotiate, including negotiate the routes, including negotiating as to how they intend on occupying certain buildings, so that to minimize disruption. So in a protest, disruption are inevitable, because that is part of the protest. There can't be any protest without disruption. So they are part of the cause. So what the police are tasked in terms of the regulation of the Gatherings Act, they should try to sort of like find an amicable solution. So what we've seen and that is happening, they approach the protesters and they start shooting, without even trying to meet up with the protesters. I'm
glad you raised that issue, because we spoke to Apele Lebutwana a little while ago, and she was reporting on it on behalf of Wits, Voice of Wits, and she was shot by the police. So obviously this has to be an infringement of her rights, is it? Does she have any appeal to recourse?
Indeed, she will have appeal to recourse. If her rights have been violated, like each and every citizen of the Republic of South Africa, she have a recourse. And then she can establish that through her own legal team, if indeed she wishes so.
And just to touch on that also, you would have heard about the death of Thokozisi Ntumba.
Correct.
That happened in Braamfontein, and may his soul rest in peace. So it was under those circumstances that the police are just shooting randomly, without trying to maintain or control the crowd. And then he was just caught in between the crossfire. And at that particular time, I was in court in Hillbrow representing another student who had been arrested on Tuesday. And I heard that student were being shot, and then there's also a casualty of the members of the public. I do not call him as a civilian. He's part of the protest. If he was there in Braamfontein, you can't separate who's not protesting and who is protesting. So.
But allegedly to be then shot 3 times.
Point blank.
Point blank. Just
coming from the clinic. There was a clinic there, the private doctor is called My Clinic. He was coming from there. He was just shot after exiting that. It could have been a student. It could have been anyone. But it shows how the police respond to these protests.
There's a report that we covered a little while ago where there was suggestion that the police are not trained well to handle such situations. Now, Advocate Moela, you talked about your experience since 2015. I think you mentioned, you've been in the trenches that long. Have you noticed a change in how the police deal with such situations over the years, or has it gotten worse over time?
It has gotten worse. I think the main intention perhaps is to instill fear. You instill fear by shooting a student, rubberizing them, or either arresting them and detaining them for long to discourage other people in terms of protesting, because they have to think of those consequences, and they have to balance those consequences against their rights. So that is something very unfortunate. Because if you look at since the death of Thokozisi Ntumba, and how the police have been responding, I guess they have perhaps been given an instruction from National. But since Thokozisi Ntumba's death, they have not responded in the way they have. Because I've been observing from far in Braamfontein. I've been, since caught the release of the student on Thursday, I've been on the street, but from far, so that I can be available to students. So I've seen that the police have not been carrying guns for now, have allowed students to demonstrate, and nothing has happened. There's no damage to property. There's no one who has been arrested. So that means the police can respond accordingly, as we have seen from Thursday.
Gentlemen, we'll have to call time on this interview. Thank you so much for speaking to us. That was Advocate